Just had a few opening comments. Well, first of all, I'm excited for our student athletes, our coaches and staff, as I know how anxious they've been to start their season, especially since our postponement announcement on August 11th. The decision was very directly driven by our medical subcommittee and our medical experts across the Big Ten 14 institutions, as well as the leadership of our COPC. We had a return to a competition task force that maybe I would spend a minute or so on. Medical subcommittee that was led by Sandy Barber, the athletics director at Penn State. Scheduling subcommittee led by athletic director Barry Alvarez of Wisconsin. And I was asked to chair the media subcommittee. And those three groups worked in tandem and in collaboration, side by side. We were always led by the medical subcommittee, but for Coach Alvarez and I, we stayed awfully close and provided a number of models that we can talk about if you want, in order to provide the medical subcommittee as well as the COPC with as much information, as many options as possible. I want to reiterate, though, that this is a first step, and we have a lot of work to do still between now and kickoff, as Paul indicated, on October 23rd and 24th. Proud of how we've come together in a difficult time, but incredibly proud that we've been driven by the medical experts. We said we were going to, and that's where we find ourselves today. So let me turn it over for Coach Fitz to say a few comments as well, and then we can take some questions.
Do y'all think you would have gotten to this point with the Big Ten returning, regardless of President Trump's activity or involvement?
Well, yeah, you'd have to talk to Commissioner Warren on that specific kind of conversation. But I'd also ask Jeff to speak again. The medical advances with the antigen daily test have really come about here over the course of the last 7 to 10 days. And so that's a big component and really a part of the framework for this return to competition. So, I'd ask maybe Jeff to just speak about the opportunity to partner with multiple organizations to acquire those tests.
Yeah, it hasn't been a particularly nice period for this league in terms of the divisiveness and some of the things that have been said. I'm just curious what you think the takeaways are from this last month or so that can be applied going forward to, I don't know if it's healing or whatever the word you want to use to move forward as a league.
I think, Adam, the collaboration, the commitment to each other, the commitment to the student athletes, the ability for us to come together over the last 40 days or so. It was 36 days since the announcement of the postponement, and really rally behind the one common goal, and that is to continue forward with what the student athletes have wanted from the beginning, which was an opportunity to play, but do it in a safe way. So those are just some takeaways that I feel that all of us across not only the athletic director level, but I know our coaches were outspoken, and those things, I think, teach us all a lesson. And the hope is that we'll be better for all that we've gone through. But we did it together, and we've got to this point together.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Peter Warren of the Daily Northwestern. Peter?
Hi, thank you. I just have a few for Jim. What would you say to non-student athletes who are hearing about the decision and those who do not have access to the same level of testing as the student athletes will get?
It's a great question, Peter. It really is. And that was a decision that was made, and not with a lot of dialogue, and not with an awful lot of reflection on what that would mean. In the end, this is something that the Big Ten is administering, and obviously we're one of the institutions in the Big Ten. And so it's a fair question, and I don't know if I have an answer other than that.
Why do you think, sort of, obviously the Big Ten is administering, but why do the football players and student athletes and theoretically deserve it over other members of the community?
Yeah, another really good question. This was a conference-wide decision, and as a member of the conference, you just try to make the best decision that you can for your institution. And we had our president obviously was involved, and our trustees, and there were a lot of people that made this decision. And so I would just say it wasn't done hastily. It was done with a lot of careful consideration, but it's a really fair question.
And then the statement from the Big Ten said updates on other fall sports and winter sports will come shortly. Is there a timeline for that?
I would say, within a period of, I would hope a few days, if not into next week. We have to get our arms around what we're going to do with the fall sports. But that decision, as you mentioned, from the Big Ten is forthcoming.
How do you guys internally pivot from that, so to speak? At what point is it, well, can we still do this? We've got new medical advancements and so forth. Can you take us a little bit behind the scenes of how you guys revisit and ultimately do a 180 on a decision that we got pretty definitive statements on twice a month ago?
Matt, the decision from the very beginning was that it was going to be a postponement. It wasn't a cancellation of the season. And so that meant that we as a conference and individual schools had work to do to provide a path forward, a safe path forward in order to play. And hence the creation of those 3 subcommittees that worked, again, we worked daily as committees, and we were almost together daily amongst the 3 committees, and tried to create, again, a successful plan that was safe and was led by Dr. Mianis and, as been described, Dr. Borchers and Sandy Barber. And so, that's where you have an awful lot of conversations. For me, it was to talk with the folks at Fox and ESPN, and those groups have been great partners of ours. For Barry, it was to look at the football schedule with our head coaches, and then for he and I to get together. And then finally, that other subcommittee worked diligently, strictly on the medical piece. And one of the critical elements is we had representation across all 14 institutions on that medical committee. So every school was represented, and I think 13 have medical centers attached to the universities. So it just gave us really the knowledge and the resources medically to do some things maybe that haven't been done, and in a way collaborate in a way that maybe hasn't been done in maybe other conferences or across maybe some professional sports organizations. And that tandem type of mentality, that collaborative mentality, led us to just providing options to the COPC. At the end of the day, the Council of Presidents were going to make this decision about whether it was right for us to resume right now or not. And we just tried to provide them options and safe options that they could consider.
I think there were 96 games the Big Ten controlled, 56 of which ended up appearing on not BTN, either FS1, Fox, or the ESPN family of networks. So you do have, it seems like, a similar amount of games, at least available inventory to your non-league rights holders. Do you anticipate to be a similar amount? And what kinds of things did you have to give back to them to assure that there might be a close, financially, you might be able to arrange a similar relationship as you did previously?
So probably 2 answers there, Paul. One is that we did have a chance to talk with them, as I've mentioned, each and every step of the way. And so we've gone down now to 63 games, 62, and then the Big Ten championship. So I think you'll see a similar distribution. I had a chance to talk to Burke Magnus this morning, and I had and multiple calls today with Larry Jones and Mark Silverman of Fox. And so the devil will be in the details about distribution and which games and some of those types of things. And then the financial piece of it will, I think, still be to be determined based on matchups and windows and some of those things. So we don't have all of that information yet, and this remains a work in progress since we just announced it today. and we had 3 or 4 different models for the presidents to look at. Although all of the options were kind of a cascading approach. We could start in October, we could start in November, December. I think things that you've reported about and others have. So we're nearing some clarity on some of those areas, the financial piece of it, exact games, and where the inventory will be placed, but to be determined. But again, I can't explain and express how good of a partner that we have with Fox and ESPN, and that's a key for us to move forward.
And along those lines, you did have, before, I think your principles were that the teams had to agree after the first weekend of November to move a game into prime time. There were only, I think, 2 Friday night games that were Big Ten games that were on Friday night. Have any of those changed to where you might play on Friday throughout November for added exposure, or potentially more primetime games deeper into the season?
What we've talked about is being flexible, being fair, and really fair from the standpoint of health and safety. And what does that look like in between games? And if we were to play on a short week, what does that mean? And if we are going to do that, again, as we try to put this together, that it's distributed equally across the 14 institutions, and no one school, was put into a more difficult spot than another based on, again, the rhythm of the season, if that makes sense.